The Queen has returned, and with her the memories of greatness. She made the passion of the thirsty fanboys become the astonishment of the world. The unthinkable become fact. She carried the heart of Peru with her and made her every fight vicarious for her countrymen. All for one and one for all. Turning missed check hooks into statements and any lingering doubts into split decision wonderment that just maybe there was a connection to something higher. Now, a new flyweight woman props up the throne. Not the embodiment of a successor, but the instrument in her own destiny. A punishing force from Massachusetts, who has spent her whole life waiting for the moment that she can truly begin her reign by ripping apart the cantuta, piece by piece, and tearing into the UFC's most famous body of work. Simply put, a woman consumed by the idea of redirecting history. The Queen of Queens. Tonight, in the most anticipated fight in UFC history, the megastar, a two-division runner-up who personifies the thirst of fight fans, is back to confront the greatest juggernaut the flyweight division has ever known, who has won half her fights, period. This is how it should be. The best against the best. Everything right there for the taking. Legacy, greatness, destiny. Will it be Lima or Springfield? The grappler or the sublime striker? A dream restored or hell unleashed? Will it be what is? Or what we so desperately want it to be? There's a simple way to find out who truly belongs on the throne. Lock the door behind them and let them fight. For there can be only one Queen. It's UFC 230. Shevchenko versus Eubanks, and it starts right now. What's up, Fight fans? It's your boy Jack Slack. Fights Gone By podcast episode 102. And it's going to be another McGregor Khabib heavy episode. Don't think we're going to do any news today because, fucking nothing's happened that would overshadow what we're talking about today or even be comparable with it. I need to get a theme tune because otherwise you don't know when the Cold Air Open starts and when I start talking. But never mind. Let's talk about UFC 229, possibly the biggest UFC that's ever happened. We say that every subsequent McGregor fight, but Dana's saying more than 2 million pay-per-view buys. I could believe that, to be honest. I was going to say I would be surprised, but I could believe that. Are we going to see the biggest drop-off in history for 230? I think it's got to set the record, because you're going from a McGregor fight to something that hasn't even been announced yet. But yeah, I thought it was a decent event, a good event. Shall I say good? I'm trying to remember what the rest of the card was like. As I said, my missus was away for the weekend, so I managed to get the drunken live tweeting going. And on Sunday daytime, I thought I was fine, and I was sat up reading a book upright in a chair, and I somehow managed to drift off. So that's why I don't do that very often, but it was really good fun being up and just being belligerent at the time of the fights. What did I see? Didn't see Ryan LaFleur versus Tony Martin because I used that to go on a booze run, assuming Ryan LaFleur would be a boring fight. However, he gets head kicked in it was the third round, so it could have been boring up to that, but I'll have to catch up on that. Nick Lenz versus Gray Maynard. This was a little bit tragic. It was quite funny because I floated the idea of turning Khabib southpaw. If the McGregor left hand is the biggest concern, the problem with it is that you can't roll down behind your lead shoulder. There's no comfortable human reaction. It's instinctual to roll down behind your shoulder when someone's punching at you, but you can't do it against southpaws and get away from the power hand. So I was saying, switching Khabib southpaw if you were absolutely terrified of that left hand. And it's one of the very few standing weapons that McGregor uses. He barely uses his jab at all. But yeah, so Nick Lentz came out southpaw and decided that he's the best striker in the world southpaw. He did decently against Gray Maynard. Gray Maynard started to pick it up around the second round. He looked a little bit sharper at the start. Landed a nice counter right hand as his, from that open side angle again. But yeah, just got smoked. High kick came up over the shoulder and his legs like jumped off the floor and he fell to his face. Gray Maynard is a sad state nowadays. He should have retired after that Nate Diaz fight, but you know, he chooses to stay around. And then Nick Lentz congratulated Brett Kavanaugh in his post-fight speech, which if you feel any way about that, like the Brett Kavanaugh thing, you know, there's no real way that you couldn't shoehorn it in without trying to trigger people, you know, like there's no one would actually say that as like a congratulation to Brett Kavanaugh. So yeah, just being a chode really, which is standard Nick Lentz, to be honest. He seems to build his personality, at least on Twitter, around triggering the libs when really everyone hates him. So, you know, someone was telling me he's got the most attempted guillotines in the UFC and only like 3 finished, but everyone calls him a guillotine specialist. But yeah, you know, whatever. Low card fight. No one in that is going anywhere anytime soon. Yana Kunitskaya versus Lena Landsberg. Both women who've tried to take the crown from Cyborg. However, Landsberg, there wasn't actually a title at the time. But this fight was dog shit. I don't really rate fights anymore, but as I said at the time on Twitter, this is a 1-star fight. It is very, very bad. Kunitskaya just leaned on Landsberg and threw her a few times and laid on top of her. Landed, allegedly, I think these stats were bollocks, you know, like the glory stats. They come up halfway through the fight. You're like, that's not true. I can see that that's not what happened. But these stats came up and said that she landed 145 strikes in the course of the fight. But she didn't leave a mark on Landsberg, you know? So, just standard women. Well, these are supposed to be the 2 biggest women at bantamweight because they both comfortably fought at featherweight. And neither of them does any damage. So, you know. Shit fight. Scott Holtzman surprised me positively against Alan Patrick, or Alan Patrick, depending on what you want to call him. He's weird. I think he's like a capoeirista or something like that. So he's got these really long movements, likes to do the sort of jinga, as Anderson Silva would bring out occasionally. But his hands are just awful. He was swinging from way behind him, leaving himself wide open. And when Holtzman kept catching him with that open side counter, I was thinking, oh my god, is this a preview of the main event? I was getting really uncomfortable about the main event, like ending with one counter a la Jose Aldo versus Conor McGregor. So yeah, that was weird, but Alan Patrick kept going for it and then got knocked down and pounded out from Mount. With those Jeremy Horn specials, the palm on the face, push him down into the mat and then let your hand slide out and elbow in the face. Aspen Ladd smoked Tonya Evinger, proving that she is a better fighter than Cyborg, conclusively. No, I was quite impressed by this. I mean, I was about ready to turn off the TV and just get drunk until the main event at the point that they said that there was going to be another women's bantamweight fight on the card, but it wasn't too bad. Aspen Ladd, yeah, fun lass. She's my second favourite Aspen, after the place. Oh, and the porn star. Vincenzo Luke versus Jalen Turner. This was a fun one. Turner was like, I don't want to say Blacksplosive, but they were treating him like he's Blacksplosive. But all the way through, he was doing flashy shit and then getting hit immediately afterwards. And the commentators were like jizzing themselves over Turner. And I'm going, but he's getting cracked in the jaw by like overhands every time he does anything. And then Luke just stopped him, and they were like, that came out of nowhere. And you're like, well, no, it was actually happening all the way up to that point. So a weird little fight, but Vincenzo Luke or Luque, or whatever his name is, but he's been around for a little while, and he's quite promising, so quite excited for that. And Turner, you know, he's one of those guys that you can see from the way he moves, decent instincts and decent ability to pick stuff up. He needs people who are going to get the right stuff going into his head, you know. Once you've done your flashy bollocks, the more important part is that you get out of the way. Jussier Formiga versus Sergio Pettis. In what was a title eliminator, Sergio Pettis put on the typical Sergio Pettis fight, just did as little as possible to lose the fight. I'll throw a couple of strikes and then maybe he'll get a takedown with a couple of minutes left in the round and maybe I won't bother getting up. The dude has no urgency. You know, it hasn't finished a fight since 2013 when he was on the regional circuit. Just standard Sergio Pettis. Like, absolutely no killer instinct, and Formiga just made him look silly. Didn't like completely outclass him, but just took a very convincing decision that no one was really going to argue with. Formiga actually looked all right on the feet. I thought he was jabbing in and dipping down to the side to throw the left hook and catch the collar tie at several points. His takedowns went in nicely. I was saying I'd like to see him kick because he's the guy wanting the takedown, so you don't really have to worry about being taken down off a kick, but he did fine with just his hands. Michelle Waterson versus Felice Herrig was pretty shit, to be honest. Like, everyone was going on about Michelle Waterson's kicks, and I was just like, it's a good thing Felice Herrig is only walking on a straight line and doesn't know how to deal with those kicks, because Rose Namajunas, she got outside that lead leg twice, and almost took her head off the first time and did take her head off the second time. Michelle Waterson's straight line kicks are not... she's got the technique, but she doesn't have the same... it doesn't fit into her game as well as the other guys from Jackson Wink who use the low line side kicks and oblique kicks. Hers is just like pump it straight out of the stance wherever they're standing and hope that it works. And then she comes down in like a cross-legged stance and gives them the dominant angle. Whereas someone like John Jones is always thinking about where he is before he kicks and where he's going to be after he kicks. And then you got your head and arm throw at one point too, because I kept saying she goes for that headlock a lot, and I was like, that's just women's MMA. You could say that about literally anyone in this side of the sport, but she finally got it. Good on Michelle Waterson, gets the win. Can't believe how many people she's beaten with how her striking looks just generally, but Derek Lewis versus Alexander Volkov. This was just painful. Volkov tools him up for all but the last second of the fight, basically. And then he gets cracked with a right hand, because Derek Lewis throws a right hand back off everything he does. And he gets cracked with a right hand and goes, I'm going to try and intercept him with a stepping knee, which is Stefan Struve style thinking. Stefan Struve has been knocked out like 3 times trying to intercept people with knees or step in with big uppercuts. And he just knocks Volkov flat. So Volkov just blows it again. He was in line for his title shot. Biggest win of his career over Verdum. Is given this softball because, as you could see, his skills were clearly miles ahead of Lewis. And Lewis has no cardio, and Lewis doesn't have much technique, but Volkov just gave him the fight. And now they're talking about Lewis versus Cormier for 230. They're trying to hurriedly put that together. How shit would that be? Dominic Hayes versus Ovin Prue. I was really pleasantly surprised by this. He was getting all these guys out there in one round, and that wasn't impressing me because it was the same 2 tricks over and over again. It was the round kick and the left straight. And in this fight, he actually showed a ton of takedown defense. He showed combinations. Just looked really good all round and actually promising. But neither of them could shut up about football. In the opening package and in the post fight, they're like, "I'm an athlete. Just so everyone knows, I'm an athlete." It was bad. And to be fair, the commentators can never shut up about it either. And all the pre-fight stuff is like, you used to play football for the so-and-so's. But yeah, I'm really quite sold on Hayes. I wrote something about him a little while ago before the Jared Cannonier fight. And I'm just excited to have some promise in that division. Right, let's talk about the main event before we go back to the co-main, because that's what all the people who've never listened to this podcast before and have seen the thumbnail and tuned in will be hoping for. Conor McGregor versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. Now, I've already written a huge article on this at Vice, how Khabib Nurmagomedov smashed Conor McGregor or whatever it was. If you want to check that out, go to Vice or go to the Fight Primer and you'll get a link straight to it. Few surprises in this fight. One of them was that Conor McGregor defended himself quite well on the ground at many points and stopped Khabib doing what he normally does. And the other one was that Khabib's striking, despite being spazzy as fuck, had a certain degree of sort of technicality to it. Or craft. Let's say craft. Yeah, from the get-go, Conor McGregor came out and, as I said in all my articles last week, watch the feet. If McGregor's doing the evasive thing, that's going to make a difference in the fight. But he's Conor McGregor, so he came out and immediately put the pressure on the wrestler, which is very dangerous to do, obviously. But he did look it looked like it surprised Nurmagomedov right off the bat. He clipped him with the left hand, and the crowd went mental. But Nurmagomedov sort of jogged round off the cage and immediately shot very long and very low. Head on the outside, comes up into the high crotch. Difference between the head inside single and the head outside single, or the head inside, or some people just call them the single and the high crotch. But the head position is a huge deal. We talked about this when we were talking about Andrei Koreshkov and Douglas Lima the other week. But head on the outside typically in grappling gives more opportunity to get the guillotine, and in wrestling, guys will try and go around towards your back. You know, they'll take a handful of crack and push your head down and start trying to circle towards your back. And the Nurmagomedov family, apparently, because I watched a translation of his father teaching at an MMA gym, saying we always shoot with the head on the outside for the single because it takes you away from the rear knee and the rear uppercut. And it did that repeatedly in this fight. But there's sort of different philosophies on it. Some guys, like DC, you can watch him use the high crotch, you know, the head on the outside single, as its own move, and he'll be doing its own finishes off it. The other approach is something like John Smith, who is the coach, you know, the wrestling coach of Johnny Hendricks and countless other great wrestlers. He believed that the high crotch was a setup. You know, you take the high crotch and then you switch off to the double leg. You take one hand off, you know, you take one hand off the leg you're holding and you go and catch the other one and you finish the double leg. So two different philosophies there, but Nurmagomedov's father referred to it, at least in the translation that I was watching, as the beginning of the alphabet. So that's what he means. He means get the leg and then you can start working other stuff. So Khabib comes up on this high crotch and McGregor's spinning around. They have a little period where they look like two dogs chasing each other's tails. And then Khabib cracks him down onto his side and frees his right hand and catches the double and finishes it onto the fence. And immediately he gets into that, well, we used to call it the laming out position, but Khabib can actually do some stuff from it. And Dominic Cruz pointed this out, but he does manage to cross the opponent's legs almost every time he does it. It's incredible. And I was going back and watching the footage, and he will feed one leg under with his knee. He goes up into that like squatting position before he grapevines the leg, and he'll squeeze one leg under with his knee and then stretch them both out and sit on them. Now, McGregor actually did really well shutting down some of Khabib's main quirks, which I suspect is the work of guys like Kavanagh, and if I don't, you know, even though you don't want to give him credit, probably Dylan Dennis, but he was holding over the back of the shoulder so that Khabib couldn't pull out and start landing those uppercuts that he did against Edson Barbosa from that position. When he was, pushed up against the fence with his back to the fence, he wasn't putting his hands far out and trying to force himself up on them, which meant that Khabib couldn't reach behind him, catch the wrist and drive him down onto it, trapping his hand and starting to open up with strikes. I was very impressed in that first round how difficult he made it for Khabib to strike. But equally, you know, Dom Cruz was really bad during this fight. I enjoy his input because he's a very smart man, but he's always had that like spikiness with people he's in the booth with. But like at this event, he was really bad. He was talking about like Conor McGregor wearing Khabib out by getting punched in the face, and then he was saying like, why is Conor McGregor slowing down? He's not done, you know, he hasn't had to do anything from the bottom. But the whole time he was on the bottom, even when Khabib wasn't striking, he was having to make adjustments and deal with Khabib's weight. And Khabib's always trying to move forward and accomplish things. The surprise was the second round when Khabib knocked him down with the right hand. Everyone went mental. You'll notice this, Khabib does a lot of weird nodding with his head. He'll nod before he throws his overhand as if to go in for the takedown, and he'll nod when he goes in for the takedown, and he nods when he goes in for the takedown. He did this several times against McGregor. He nods, and then he moves his head to the outside when once he's baited the counter. So there were occasions with both the uppercut and the left knee where he nodded straight on as if to shoot straight in for a takedown, and then threw his head way out to the left side as McGregor was throwing the uppercut or the knee and easily got the takedown. In the second round, I was really surprised at how effective he was from the closed guard, because we were talking in our pre-fight piece about how Khabib just doesn't really get stuck in the closed guard. He's very good at tripoding up and making sure guys can't close their legs around him and making stuff happen. And, McGregor's previous performance against a wrestler, it's incredible that he's only fought like one really top wrestler in all his time with the UFC. But his one performance against the really top wrestler, Mendes, he got him into closed guard and sort of stalled him out, tired him out, and outlasted him. He couldn't stall against Khabib. Khabib was always tripoding up with a forearm across his throat and punching and posturing, and he did really good damage from there. And that was where I started to see like a glimpse of Fedor there. I'd been likening the dynamic ground and pound, happily standing and hitting from side control, even if you give up the guard in the process. But then he really started to look like Fedor when McGregor had his feet on his hips or whatever it was from open guard, and McGregor had his hands over his head, and Khabib was just punching like he wanted to smash whatever was in the way. And I was going, "You're going to break your hands, mate. Be careful doing that," because he's just pounding McGregor's forearms, and he even punched the mat at one point, and I was like, "Oh my god, it's Fedor Mark II. We're here. He's come. He's finally risen." But yeah, that was the point where McGregor was getting pretty badly beaten up, and I could see why you wouldn't stop it. Rather, I don't think I'd have stopped it if I were reffing that fight. Of course, I don't want the job of reffing that fight; it'd be very difficult. But Dominic Cruz was going on about how he was trying to wear Khabib out, and I can understand like his whole thing was trying to outlast Khabib and slow him down a bit on the ground when he was effectively stopping him from striking effectively. But when you're getting punched in the face and not offering anything back, that's not really tiring someone out, That's the Homer Simpson method. And then there was that illegal knee as Khabib went for the Kimura. And Conor did cheat a lot in this fight. Apparently I'm the only one calling it out. People were like, "Jack, you're the only guy in the media telling people that McGregor cheated." And there are a lot of fouls in this fight that you can see. And we'll talk about a couple more of them later. But the knee to the head, I think, might have been precipitated by Khabib passing the guard and dropping the knee on the neck almost immediately. He does that neck ride that Josh Barnett and Minoru Suzuki do, except he really dropped into it like he was dropping his knee on the guy, and then locked up the Kimura, and Conor kneed him in the head, I suppose back, but his was far more flagrant and deliberate. Reminds me of when Bas Rutten kneed Minoru Suzuki in the head from bottom of side control back when he was early and sort of spazzy, and he was like, "Sorry," and Minoru Suzuki goes, "No, it's fine," and then headbutts him. Oh, I love Suzuki. I've managed to talk about him twice in very quick succession in a fight completely unrelated to him, so I'm quite happy. In terms of the cheating, like, there was a lot going on. There was toes in the fence and stuff, and the problem was that Herb Dean acknowledged all of it, which, if he hadn't seen it, or if he hadn't acknowledged it, you could say that he hadn't seen it. But he's seeing it all, telling McGregor to stop, and then when McGregor doesn't stop, he just ignores it. The really flagrant one was the hand in the glove, which we'll get to in a second. But the thing that really impressed me was how McGregor prevented the body lock. And the body lock only happened for the first time immediately before the back take and the choke. That's how important the body lock was. But he did a very good job of stopping Khabib from linking his hands along the fence, and he did it with two hands on one. He brought his left hand all the way across and under the elbow, and then was controlling the wrist with his right hand. And then, sort of around third round, he realised that he could put his fingers in the cuff of the glove and hold that way, and then he wouldn't have to use 2-on-1 to do it. So that was pretty disappointing that he did that. And then Khabib pulled away from him, threw a punch while he was clearly still holding the glove right in front of Dean. And then came back in, taking a 12-6 elbow in the process, and said, "Hey, he's still holding my glove." And Herb Dean's there like, "No, don't worry about it. Work." Herb Dean's only concern in this fight was telling Khabib to work. But as McGregor was able to hold off the linking of the hands, often by legal means, I'm not saying that he only did it by cheating, Khabib had to find alternate ways to try and get him to the ground. So what he did was what Randy Couture used to do a lot, which was link the hands under the crotch and lift, and then try and kick out the back leg. And he did that quite a few times successfully. That's how he got it to the ground. And the way that he did that was when McGregor tried to elbow him in the head, he freed the hand and went straight through the legs. The elbows to the back of the head, this happens in every fight now, because guys are allowed to do the Travis Brown elbow. So you throw three and one hits the spine, basically, and the referee just goes, "Oh, well, no, they were probably all legal." It's such a shitty rule. People are like, "Well, I think they should just allow 12-6 elbows." And I'm like, I am fine with 12-6 elbows from mount and from guard and places like that. But even when you're talking like you have to change the angle of the elbow and stuff like that, all the bollocks that the guys who've been on reffing courses say, even when you're talking about that, guys are so ineffective at calling the back of the head when those elbows are going in from the position that they normally do, which is defending a takedown, that I think, fuck it, just ban all downward elbows altogether, because you're inept at actually refereeing them. What really surprised me was Khabib's striking. The jab, I joked about how Al Iaquinta is not a good measuring stick for your jab, but his jab looked good here, and Nate Diaz got McGregor by walking him down and nailing his own hands to his head. Diaz, that is, in guard, not opening up on the way in and reaching. Jose Aldo, Eddie Alvarez, so many other guys have been tempted to reach at McGregor, and that's when he catches them with counters. Mayweather is the only one who really just kept readjusting that distance and didn't rush, and made McGregor move his feet faster than he'd wanted to. McGregor wants that perfect distance where he can just take that slight step or lean back and then come over the top of the counter. But if you move in slightly, he has to move back again. So that's what, if you watch those first few rounds of the Mayweather fight, it's just him going, no, I'm just going to step in, mate. Over and over and over again. He doesn't really land that many punches. He just makes McGregor move. Habib actually made sure that he was on the end of his jab the entire time. He was flicking it out and McGregor wasn't getting away in time because he was making sure that he was standing on top of McGregor. Then he did that nice thing where he nodded his head as if to do the takedown and threw the right hand over the top, which was gorgeous. And then followed up with the jab immediately after throwing his right hand. And then there was a beautiful moment, I think in round 3, when they were on the feet quite a lot. And I was getting very uncomfortable for Habib then because I thought he was doing very well on the feet in terms of his boxing with McGregor. But he was also completely ignoring the body kicks and body punches and obviously slowing down slightly. And you can talk about the shorts grab, which we will in a second, but McGregor did stop his takedowns in that round, which was really surprising. And I was really getting worried because he just wasn't doing anything about the body kicks, which, again, someone earlier in the week was like, teeps don't wind you, mate. And I was like, firstly, not all front kicks are teeps. If you watch Tony Ferguson against Anthony Pettis, the spite that he throws on those front kicks is ridiculous. And those aren't the teeps that you're being nudged with when you're sparring in Muay Thai. They're not the same thing. But yeah, McGregor tires people out with those body kicks, and Habib was doing nothing about it, which was pretty bad. But when he threw his right hand and McGregor came back with the left hand, he ducked right under it. He punched and went right into the weave and caught the clinch, which was gorgeous. And it probably would have been a takedown, but McGregor grabbed a big fistful of shorts, a la Anderson Silva. So that was very sad. But the end of the fight came as he got a takedown. McGregor tried to get up, and in the course of getting up, he'd left his body exposed for the body lock. And then Habib immediately started sagging on him, just as he did against Abel Trujillo, those constant mat returns. Pulled himself onto McGregor's back, went to mount as McGregor put his back to the mat, hit him a little bit. McGregor turned over and he got the choke. And, there's always arguing about whether it was a choke or a neck crank or if he actually wasn't in anything at all. And you're just like, you don't know. I don't doubt that if Habib choked you over your chin and actually caught your carotid arteries, you'd probably get choked out. Equally, if Habib choked you over your teeth, I expect they'd explode. So I'm not going to judge. The other one was people being like, well, neck cranks aren't as bad as chokes. And you're like, do you understand what a neck crank is? A neck crank is supposed to break your neck. Like, that's the whole point of it. If you watch Damien Meyer or Shinya Aoki apply a good neck crank, that's the purpose. Which is why I'm always uncomfortable watching, like, Shinya Aoki versus Carl Beerbong, or... Well, the Rick Story one was kind of bad, but yeah, if you're twisting someone's head around like that, what's the option if they don't tap? Though I do love a grobit, which, is also a neck crank, so can't be too judgy. But yeah, tremendous work from Habib. The stuff that happened afterwards, I really, just beyond the scope, I don't care. Like, the sad part is that the people who are defending this and being like, hey, it's part of fighting, are the same idiots who pretend that they understand that it's all showmanship when it's most of the time. But they desperately wish this was what it was like all the time. They want to pretend that Frank Mir and Brock Lesnar really do hate each other, and it wasn't, they didn't get that photo of them introducing their families to each other like the day before the event. Just shitty stuff. And Dylan Dennis is back in the news, and I can't think of a man who's had more impact on the sport with less accomplished. He was like sending abusive messages to Keenan Cornelius the other day, calling him a rat because he said that ever since Conor McGregor used the word rat. That's Dylan Dennis's word now. And he was like, fight me. And Keenan Cornelius was like, but you haven't been to a jiu-jitsu tournament in years. Oh, just what a shitlord. But fucking all of them are awful. Like, everyone who was involved in that. And there's the double standard. The UFC are going to be like, oh, this is deplorable. But they're going to use it in the tape for the rematch, in the promo stuff. But if everyone acted like that in the UFC, if that happened on anything but the big stars, that would be really problematic. And there were fights in the concourse and on the way out, you just don't want that shit happening. It's stupid. And what happens if, while Habib's jumping from the cage, that's like a 4-foot platform or whatever it is. What if he turns his ankle? Or lands on someone's foot and turns his ankle? or lands on a chair and turns his ankle or some shit like that, or blows out his ACL, as other fighters have done doing stupid things in the past. And the dude who punched McGregor in the back of the head, that was just lame too. And it seems like you have to take a side on this, but I think jumping out of the cage and attacking people, and the people jumping into the cage to attack people, all of that is bullshit. Whether or not you believe... I think the Dolly incident was bullshit. I think it's all stupid bullshit. There isn't really a side... You don't need to be like on Team Khabib or Team Conor. And really the only team to be on after that night was Team Tony. Because in the co-main event, Tony Ferguson was everything that Tony Ferguson is, and I love it. Spinning, front kicks, elbows, weird boxing whereby he takes the punch but taps the other guy with a check hook and they end up more hurt. Just the high pace walking his man down. Standard Tony Ferguson. And then he gets hit by a right hand, gets wobbled, and I think it looked worse than it was because he decided to spin and roll and shit. But it worked so well. Like, if you just keep moving, the other guy's going to dive into some position where you're actually sort of getting the better of them, or locked up, or rolling through and getting top position. Absolute legend. And then if you saw Pettis' face afterwards, he was bleeding all over the place. Tony Ferguson, he joked about well, he might not have joked because he's Tony Ferguson. He was talking about sharpening his elbows on cheese graters, and I think might be some truth to that, because I've never seen someone cut open dudes as often as he does in the UFC. Maybe Kenny Florian back in the day, but every single fight he just splits dudes wide open. And Pettis didn't look bad, which was nice. He seems to have gotten over whatever mental breakdown he was having. So much more urgency than his brother, and flashy capoeira kicks and all that stuff. Oh, lovely stuff. And that's the exact sort of fight you want to be shown immediately before McGregor versus Khabib, because that's the one that you're guaranteed people are going to see, because they're going to tune in before the main event to try and watch the main event. If you put, like, at UFC 200, they put Khabib on the undercard, no one's seeing that. Sorry, 205 or whatever it was, whenever he beat Eddie Alvarez. So the way I ended my article was, everything after that moment is beyond our scope and frankly my interest. Both men have shown the absolute worst of mixed martial arts, and yet you can be damn sure the footage of that scrap will turn up on the promotional material for the rematch, no matter how shocked the UFC brass profess to be. What happened in the cage was fantastic, and combined with Tony Ferguson's performance in the co-main event, made for a sensational night of entertainment. In fact, if you are a casual MMA fan, and you take only one thing from this article, it should be that Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Tony Ferguson is the fight to decide who's lightweight in the world is, and has been for a long old while. And that's how I feel about it. The stuff about... The best thing about Conor McGregor losing and everyone being so prone to hyperbole is now people aren't like, yeah, but he could also beat everyone else in that class or whatever. There's this... Finally, people are realising that Conor McGregor didn't beat that many lightweights, and there's a lot of guys there who might beat him. The dude isn't magic, but by taking that 2 years off after he won the belt, there was always this like, well, he could come back and just smoke Khabib and then leave for 2 years again, and he'll still be the best lightweight in the world. But anyway, let's talk about something else that I saw this weekend that was awesome, and then we'll do some questions, and then we'll get out of here for this week. But Quintet 3, if you haven't heard about it, Quintet is the grappling organisation run by Kazushi Sakuraba, the MMA legend. Now, Sakuraba's a weird one because we've always wanted to keep him around, but watching him get beaten to shit in MMA, like every time he fought after about 2005, was really, really sad. So they book him into like a fight with Shinya Aoki, who's known as a grappler and is considerably smaller than Sakuraba. And people were like, oh, well, they'll probably just grapple. There'll be a gentleman's agreement just to grapple. And Shinya Aoki, of course, got on top of him and started beating the shit out of him. Because if it's an MMA match, there's not going to be a gentleman's agreement to do something. So we wanted to see him in like grappling events, but he went to Metamoris to take on Renzo Gracie, and he just wasn't, he's not a great pure grappler, to be honest. The grappling game has moved on a lot, and Sakuraba was always about a couple of tricks that really undid the Gracies in MMA. But Sakuraba can compete at Quintet, and he has every time, fairly unimpressively, to be honest. But he can also run Quintet, and Quintet is awesome. The idea of Quintet, I think Josh Barnett is also involved in like some kind of promotional role, but both of them compete on all their cards, which is fantastic because any chance to watch Josh Barnett compete in anything is good fun. I've accused him of being a serial dabbler before, like when he comes out and he puts on a pair of the finest cage boxing performances you've ever seen at heavyweight against Frank Mir and Roy Nelson, and then just goes, actually now I want to do some Metamoris or whatever it was. He's a guy with so many talents, but doesn't really, he dabbles in everything like pro wrestling and stuff like that. But the idea of Quintet is that it's a team event. I can't remember quite how the weights break down. I think it might have a combined weight for your 5 men. But the way it works is you have the way this one worked, at least, was that you had 4 teams, so you divide it into 2 brackets, and the 2 teams face off, and then the 2 winning teams face off in the final. No points, I don't think. Yeah, no points. Submission only. So if you go to a draw, both men step off the mat, and the next 2 men from both teams come on. If one man wins, he stays on, and the next man down in the other team comes on. So it's like a King of the Hill sort of setup, and it works really well. And there's no I think they get like a minute or 30 seconds between the matches if they're staying on, but it's so fluid, the whole thing. Eddie Bravo Invitational has that thing where they have the big announcement of who's coming on, they have to jump off the platform and stuff, and it's really quite slow between matches, even though they try and get them lined up. This one's just straight into it. It's all entertainment all the time. The format really helps with that. I can't remember if they were allowing heel hooks this time, but last time they didn't, so Craig Jones had to do leg entries but then finish dudes with knee bars. But the caliber of guys that they get in to do these tournaments are going up and up. It's fantastic. And they said last minute they were getting Uriah Faber in, so there's going to be a Team Alpha Male team, but obviously Team Alpha Male is a team of lighter weight fighters, and they don't have any heavyweights. So last minute, coming straight off the IBJJF Worlds or the IBJJF Nogi Pans or whatever it was, Gordon Ryan announces that he's taking part. And Gordon Ryan, if you don't know, is absolutely fantastic. He's one of the Danaher Death Squad, got very famous for his leg locks, but people were accusing him of being a one-dimensional leg locker, and then he came out at ADCC, and his passing was always getting better through the last EBI events too, but just came out and passed guard on some of the best grapplers in the world, won his division, got silver in the absolute. The guy is incredible. So he comes in, and the first 2 matches of the event, Sakuraba and whoever else, they go to draws. People are like, a little bit disappointing. Gordon Ryan versus Josh Barnett, which is the match we all wanted, comes on, and it's just gorgeous. Gordon Ryan pulls guard on him. Misha Tate goes, I don't know if that's a good idea, because Misha Tate was on commentary but didn't know who Gordon Ryan was, didn't know anything that was going on in the grappling world, and it was just super weird. And she kept calling Gordon Ryan Jordan Ryan, and by the end of the night she was really thirsty for him because he is absolutely yoked and also incredible at grappling. But Ryan pulls guard on him. He plays a very good butterfly half guard and butterfly guard. So what he does really well is he threatens stand-ups, and the other guy is forced to push him back down again. And when they go to push him back down again, he can grab a guillotine or use it to sweep. So he immediately tries to stand up on Josh Barnett. Josh Barnett pushes back into him, back onto the ground. And he hits a butterfly sweep on Josh Barnett, which is fucking incredible. And then he holds top on Josh Barnett, tries to grind on him a bit and work his elbows up. Josh Barnett bucks him off and he catches a triangle and submits him. And when was the last time you saw anyone, 1, submit Josh Barnett, and 2, that was probably, the go-go choke back in the day. But triangle Josh Barnett, that's insane. And that was the start of Gordon Ryan's evening. He grappled 6 times, submitted 4 dudes, and they were all world-class grapplers, guys like Vitor Ribeiro, Craig Jones. We ran through Craig Jones. Craig Jones was I was thinking of writing an article about gringos or whatever the Portuguese equivalent is. Just the under, I think it's under 88 or under 99. I forget. No, under 88 kilos in ADCC. You got Keenan Cornelius, Craig Jones, and Gordon Ryan, and the 3 of them have been sort of one-upping each other and getting better, and Gordon Ryan's still sort of top dog, but the other guys catch him up occasionally, and I thought that'd be a great article, but he just ran through Craig in this tournament, and by the end of it, Gordon Ryan had beaten 6 dudes and basically won the tournament, a team tournament, single-handed. It was really incredible. So if you haven't seen it, go and watch it. Quintet 3, it's on Fight Pass. Also, his little brother Nicky competed too, and Misha Tate had no idea who he was. She was like, probably not familiar with this level of competition, even though they like made an exception to invite him to ADCC, even though he was like 15, because he's that good. Oh, and Marcin Held turned up and was really entertaining, even though I don't remember his UFC fights being entertaining at all. He's getting reverse De La Riva and just spinning for legs the entire time. Oh, and Craig Jones tapped Boogie Martinez with Kyotera footlock, which is the footlock from a straight footlock from De La Riva guard. So you go under your own leg. It's incredible. Tons to watch on that card. Go watch it. The only disappointment was Frank Trigg turned up fatter than ever to take on Ishii, the judoka / MMA fighter, not very good. Satori, what is his name? Satoshi Ishii. And got disqualified for like 4 warnings for inactivity. I think it was a no time limit one too, and just like, oh, for fuck's sake, Frank. And it just reminded me of the Roy Nelson grappling match back in the day, because people were like, this Roy Nelson, he's could be the next big thing. Here he has beaten Frank Mir in a grappling match, and Frank Mir is so clearly not in shape to compete. Oh. The other thing that was happening this weekend was KSW, and apparently the Soldich versus Duplessis rematch was really, really good. I've not caught up on it yet. And a couple of the other fights were supposed to be really good. I do like KSW. And they offered me free tickets, so I was like, oh wait, that's the same night that McGregor's fighting can be. Oh, sorry, mate. But yeah, if you're looking for something to catch up on this weekend, because there's fuck all going on, really. I think there's a PFL event. Are they on every week? I can't remember. To be honest, I should know more about PFL, but I don't. I can't work out how it's supposed to go. All I've seen is that dudes fight way too soon after getting knocked out to try and keep this tournament or league format or whatever it is going. Not going to do a question this week because I think they were all basically Khabib versus Conor related, and I think I've done that to death now. I'm quite looking forward to moving on and getting hype for Tony versus Khabib again, and then being disappointed yet again. I just hope that Khabib can fight a little bit more often. You know, he's a guy who's had injuries, and also because of his commitment to Ramadan, which I always think is quite admirable. You know, it's kind of brought out the worst of the internet this week. Someone was like, "Oh, of course his dad says that he shouldn't have jumped out of the cage. He's a Muslim. They say one thing and do another." And I was like, "Oh, Jesus Christ." I'm not a religious dude in any way. When people tell me about their religion, I'm just sort of like, oh, really? But I kind of respect people who will put themselves through really not fun stuff for what they believe. And fasting generally sucks. But I've rolled with dudes who are fasting, and I'm just so impressed that they can do it. Like, you know, it's normally like a couple of weeks where I'm doing really well in various roles, and I'm like, Jesus, I'm doing well. Or, you know, various sparring sessions too. And then I realize, oh wait, these guys are starving. But you know, Khabib's an animal, and I can totally understand how he wouldn't be able to train at the intensity that he does during Ramadan. I just hope that he manages to actually get some fucking fights in, because like 1 or 2 a year. 2 a year would be good. But what else have we got coming up? Actually, October's a really quiet month. They blew everything on the McGregor fight. So now our next event is the fight night with Volkan Ozdemir versus Anthony Smith, or as someone put it on Reddit, eyes too wide versus eyes too close together, which is a perfect description of these two men. But that's on the 27th, so we got a couple of weeks of nothing really happening in terms of UFC events. There might be some stuff going on with Bellator. We might have to dip into boxing and kickboxing if there's that little going on. But who else is on that card? Artem Lobov versus TBD. Oh, and that's the co-main event. That tells you a lot. We got Misha Serkinov's on the card versus Patrick Cummins. Gavin Tucker, Jan Vellante. Court McGee's back. Cool. Nordin Taleb. Oh, and Stevie Ray, my boy. Yeah, so there's a few on there that could be interesting. And then we're into 2:30, which is a good card, hindered by the fact that they don't really have a main event. Oh. Anyway, I'm your boy Jack Slack. Didn't do any questions this week, mainly because they're all Conor versus Khabib related. But if you want to send a question to the podcast, fightscornbypodcast@gmail.com. If you want to know what I'm doing at any time, or buy a Blacksplosive t-shirt, or a His Fistic Majesty t-shirt, or a Boxed Up t-shirt, or a Juice to the Tits t-shirt, you can get them at thefightprimer.com, which is also where I post links to all my articles wherever I'm doing them. Pick up The Notorious, the book, which I suspect is going to go down in demand until the next time he fights, and then we all remember, oh, actually, he's a pretty good fighter. And if you want to support the podcast, which I couldn't do without your help, and get in on the Patreon episodes, new Opium War episode going up this week, and then Ali versus Liston in a couple of weeks' time. Sign up to the Patreon. And I'll catch you next week. Cheers! Still Conor bless.